and welcome to Diverse and Inclusive Leaders, the podcast show where I interview the most inspirational and thought-provoking leaders of today and unearth their unique stories of diversity and inclusion to help inspire, educate and motivate others to make the world a better place. Today, I'm delighted as ever to be joined by Geoff McDonald. Geoff is not only the first returning podcast guest that we've had on for this year, but he's also on our advisory board and a very inspirational individual. Geoff is the co-founder for Minds at Work and is an expert when it comes to mental health. He also sits as a trustee for a number of charitable foundations and was formerly the Global Vice President HR for Marketing, Communications, Sustainability and Talent at Unilever PLC. Geoff, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Leila. It's wonderful to be talking to you again.
It's always great to talk to you, Geoff. And I saw you kind of looking around and staring at the various four walls there as I was doing that, introduction. And, you know, of course, we are in a very unprecedented time at the moment, what with coronavirus and COVID-19. And I'm guessing someone of your energy levels is probably bouncing off the walls right now. So tell me, how have the last couple of weeks been for you?
Yeah, I'm finding it all really very difficult right now. This self-isolation or social distancing and not being able to get out on my bike with my mates and go for a ride and do all the things that I used to love doing. So it's really difficult. But in many ways, it's also a time for reflection, a time for rejuvenation, a time to think about doing things differently. And so as we all adapt to this new way of living, I'm really just hoping that something very, very good is going to come out of all of this for all of us.
Indeed. And for those of our listeners who don't know already, because of course you've been on the podcast show before and you've also spoken live at some of our DAR Global workshops and honestly the feedback, and I'm not just saying this because you're on our advisory board, but it's absolutely phenomenal, mainly around your personal story and how you became so passionate about mental health. Now, of course, people can go back and listen to the other podcast, but I wonder whether you can just to kind of give us some context here. How did you actually become so passionate about mental health? And then perhaps let's talk about the impact and the similarities between that and what we're experiencing as a global phenomenon right now.
Yeah, thank you, Leila. Yeah, look, the reason I'm so passionate about this particular subject, and in fact, over the last year or so, it's gone beyond just mental health, and it's more around, the health of employees in workplaces and how we try and create workplaces where, the health of an employee is a strategic priority to that business and that they do everything that they can to enhance employee health. And the reason it all goes back to my own lived experience of anxiety-fueled depression back in 2008, when I got really, really ill. I was doing a very big job in Unilever. I was looking after all our home and personal care categories around the Unilever world from an HR point of view. And, one night I woke up with a terrible panic attack, and that was the beginnings of, a 3-month journey, 3 months off work, learning how to recover, and feeling not well and suffering from anxiety-fueled depression. But, the only thing that kept me going in my darkest moments during that 3-month period was my ability to talk about my illness and to be open about the fact that I was depressed. I had anxiety-fueled depression. And, that ability to talk is what saved my life, because the response I got from most people was just the most unbelievable outpouring of love. And, talk about the power of love. In fact, we're seeing a lot of love right now with COVID-19. We're seeing so much good in humanity coming through, but just feeling loved is what kept me alive during my darkest moments. And yes, I got better and I went back to work. In 2010, I had a bit of a relapse. But then in 2012, I was walking home one evening and my wife called me to say that one of my best friends or closest friends had died by suicide that afternoon. And, I got home that night and I lay in bed and I thought, what was the difference between him and me? Here I am in 2012 starting to learn how to recover, learn how to live as somebody who might be susceptible to anxiety-fueled depression. And one of my closest friends was dead. And the simplest conclusion that I came to was that I was able to talk and he wasn't. And so stigma had killed my friend. And I'm not saying today that had he been able to talk, he would definitely be with us today. But I just honestly believe that had he been able to talk, there's a tiny, tiny chance that he would still be here. And, that's worth fighting for every single minute of the day. And so I began a piece of work in Unilever. I co-led some work around breaking stigma in Unilever. We saw an amazing impact of that work here in the UK. And around about the end of 2014, I decided to leave and go out into the world and to help organizations create environments where people, if they're suffering from a common form of mental ill health, can just put their hand up, turn to a peer, and just ask for some help, because that one conversation could save their life. And that's worth fighting for.
I love how passionate you are, and I love how, although incredibly painful for you to almost relive, it is just such a touching explanation of the story. And I think, very specifically, it can be particularly difficult almost for guys as well. And I think what was really wonderful and that came out of the workshop when you gave this speech was actually a number of the male participants and executives who are in leadership positions who are kind of sitting there saying, do you know what? Diversity, inclusion and belonging within the wider context absolutely is relevant to me. And actually, because I've heard someone else who, if you don't mind me saying, Geoff, very, very charismatic, high energy individual, very, very confident. And actually to see someone like yourself in your current form when you are feeling more well, reflecting back on their time actually really does drive it home to other individuals who are leaders. And, I think I told you this story, but someone from the workshop who listened to you speak actually said to me, Leila, I really wasn't that keen on coming today, but my boss made me. And it has been the most worthwhile kind of use of my time, because listening to Geoff talking about that story made me realize, hang on, it is okay as a male specifically. Not only am I a leader within the business, but I'm also a father at home. I've got a son who suffers. I feel the need to stand up and be brave and put on that brave face in front of everyone, where actually it's okay to talk and it is okay to be vulnerable. And so when you talk about kind of breaking these stigmas, I just couldn't agree more. And I think, whomever is listening today, whether it be just one person who listens and thinks, hey, do you know what, actually it is okay to talk about it and to create that safe place, it has absolutely been worthwhile.
Yeah.
And
the other thing, Leila, that I think is so important right now is, my story is also a story of hope and recovery. Mm-hmm. And I had dark moments for a period of 3 months, and building that degree of kind of individual accountability to try and get myself better was so important. And I think right now with COVID-19 and a lot of the anxiety and the stresses that people are feeling, and some people might fall into becoming ill with depression or with anxiety. My message is ask for help, talk to somebody, go and see a doctor, get support, and work on the advice and the guidance that you are given, because, you will get better and you can get better. And so I plead to people who are not feeling great right now to just, have that conversation and get the help and the support, because recovery is absolutely possible, and it will pass. It will pass, as difficult as it feels at the time.
Absolutely. And let's talk a little bit more about the recovery piece there, because I'm sure people are listening in today thinking, hang on, so what you're saying ultimately is there's not that much difference between kind of mental health and obviously correlation between what's happening to many, many people around the globe, which could be happening for a first time, thinking, hang on a minute, what is this feeling? I've not had this before. Ultimately they are one and the same thing. And those words of encouragement, I think, are fantastic. Clearly you've recovered and you've done so, in abundance, completely back to the usual self. How have you done that? And I guess if there was going to be some top tips and tricks, not only when it comes to working from home, but also trying to get back onto that path of normality, what would you say to people who were cooped up with suffering, I guess, from unusual feelings or kind of mental health related to COVID-19?
Look, I think it's really important up front to say that, what works for me is not necessarily going to work for everybody else. But maybe I can just share a couple of the things that were so important in helping me, one, in my recovery, and then also to maintain that recovery. Leila, I know that I am somebody who is susceptible to anxiety-fueled depression. And so therefore, me looking after my health has become the most important priority in my life. And I devote time and I am very disciplined about maintaining my health in its holistic sense. But let's come to that a little bit later as to what some of that looks like. But I think during the time that I was not well, and what were some of the things that really helped. So the first one was to actually go and get a diagnosis. So the number of people that I engage with and talk to who don't even want to go near a doctor because there's a lot of this self-stigma. I would just say, go to a professional and go and see somebody. And I think that there is a place for medication initially. Absolutely, there's a place for medication. If you had diabetes, you'd go and see a doctor and you'd have some insulin for the rest of your life. Well, if you're suffering from depression, why wouldn't you look to get some kind of medication that might just help to stabilize how you're feeling for a period of time? So I think going and getting some professional help and taking some medication is, I think, really, really important. I think the other is looking to somebody that you can talk to, where you can have a bit of some talking therapy, whether that's, cognitive behavioral therapy, or whether that's a life coach, or whether that's a clinical psychologist, but finding somebody who you are able to talk to and who can help you kind of reframe some of how you think, what you do, I think is so important. I think the other is trying to do some exercise, or just getting out into nature and doing a bit of exercise and just trying to be active. I used to have a little saying, which was, it was difficult to do, but it was so powerful. And the saying was, just do the opposite. So there would be days that I would wake up and not want to get out of bed. And I would just say, no, I must do the opposite. I must get out of bed. Or I don't feel like shaving today. Well, then I'd do the opposite. I'd go and have a shave. Or I don't feel like making a cup of tea. Well, I would go and make a cup of tea. Or I don't feel like making my bed. Making your bed in the morning, just something simple like that, and seeing how it looks afterward gives you a sense of reward that you've done something. So that was really, really important, is this kind of just this little motto of just do the opposite to what you are thinking. If I don't feel like a shave, go and have a shave. If I don't feel like a cup of tea, have a cup of tea. The other was finding somebody who had maybe experienced what you were going through. So somebody who might have been ill in the past with depression and who was now better. And what I used to find with those conversations was it just used to give me so much hope. I used to have conversations with people who had been ill, who were now better, and I used to look at them and I used to see that they were better, and it just gave me a degree of hope that I would be able to get myself better. So those, and then I think there are all sorts of alternative medicines. There's maybe learning to do a bit of meditation, some mindfulness. I mean, those can be really, really difficult when you're not feeling well, to be able to do those things.
I love the fact that you brought up medication, though, because I really do think that there still is a taboo, especially around kind of anti-anxiety and antidepressants. And I know that I've told you this before, but I did write an article on it, but I'm, have been on and off anti-anxiety and antidepressant tablets now for over a decade, and recently increased the dose. And you talk to people about this, and sometimes the comment I'll get back is, well, you kind of, so you're falsely high kind of situation. It's like, no, you're absolutely not. You have to think about this as like you say, it's like an illness. When you're in the trough of the dip, what you need is almost a step to get out of that. And once you're into that, then you can look at these alternative therapies, whether they be CBT, whether it be, life coaching. But if you are in that state, as you have described formatively, and I can very much relate to, where you literally just lifting your head up off the pillow is one thing too much almost. To have that lift, it really does make all the difference, and it certainly don't make you high in inverted commas. It's not this kind of crazy drug that's going to make you bounce off the walls, but just giving you that lift, like a migraine is cured with a ibuprofen, and then you look at exercise or whatever else it is on top. It's like you say, it's not one size fits all, is it? And everyone does need support and should not be at all ashamed with that.
Absolutely.
And you've given some great tips there, Geoff, as well as the fact that actually really every cloud has got a silver lining, like you say, looking at people who have done well and who've come out of it, like yourself, can be real encouragement to people. Now, what about those that we have seen maybe close around us, or even ourselves, and we haven't experienced things before around depression, I suppose, and anxiety? What kind of symptoms could we be possibly looking out for when it comes to self-diagnosis or spotting these signs in other people before we get to, of course, kind of cures and methodologies to help?
Yeah, look, I think when it comes to things like, anxiety, some of the symptoms are, unusual amounts of sweating and just sweating, at a lot of the time. I'm just going to talk through some of the physical symptoms, but, sweating. I mean, I remember I used to get these sort of the tingling fingers, and tips of my toes used to tingle. The palms of my hands were always quite sweaty. My heart would beat quicker than it normally does. You'd get these kind of palpitations or panic attacks, feeling really restless, a restlessness about you. And sometimes, just, needing to go to the toilet a lot, so not being able to control to some extent your bowel and your bladder, and waking up with a dry mouth and feeling this dryness. Those I think are some of the kind of the physical symptoms around anxiety. And then you've got, some of the more what I would call psychological symptoms, like, degrees of impatience and not being very patient with people, and very high levels of irritability and anger. I mean, the other thing was the sort of catastrophizing thoughts and catastrophizing over stuff. And that's why, around this time, it's even more, I think people need to be more alert to the fact that, with COVID-19 and people worrying about their futures and their jobs, I mean, one can really catastrophize. And, to what extent can you try and just, be in the present and live in the present, and try not to think too much about the future and the past, feeling indecisive, not sleeping very well, poor concentration. I think those are some of the sort of physical and psychological symptoms around anxiety. I think when it comes to depression, here you get feelings of sadness, guilt, hopelessness, helplessness, sometimes just completely emotionless. I think some of the sort of the psychological symptoms or cognitive symptoms there are, self-doubt, just doubting yourself all the time. Blame, a lot of blame and self-criticism. I remember I used to look at myself in the mirror and think, oh, I look awful, I look terrible, and I wasn't really looking that different to what I normally look like. But there's this kind of self-criticism and self-doubt and a belief that others see you negatively, poor judgment, poor concentration, maybe a lot of crying as a sort of behavioral symptom, neglecting yourself. That's what I was saying about having a shave of a morning and not feeling like having a shave. And they're just going and having that shave and putting on a nice pair of clothes, or going to a hairdresser. I mean, I know in COVID-19 we can't do that, but neglect of responsibilities, change in sleep patterns. So I think those are just, those are some of the symptoms that I think we need to be alert to. And we all feel some of those symptoms all the time, But if you're feeling those symptoms and they're not going away and you've had them for sort of 3 weeks constantly, then, that's the time to actually have a conversation with someone, or maybe go and see your doctor and get some help.
And I guess finally, because I'm conscious of time here, and there's so many really kind of wonderful pieces of not only kind of symptomatic things we can look out for, but also possible solutions to the issues. But what about those who are feeling these kind of thoughts and such like, and need some support from work? How would they address that? Because Geoff, I know you're an absolute expert when it comes to normalizing these activities within the workplace. And of course, now we're doing more conference calls with people, and hopefully leaders are really stepping up to the mark and making us communicate more so. But how could we perhaps address this with our workplace? Or on the flip side of feeling all of this and maybe going to the doctors outside in our personal time, but what about the workplace side of things?
Yeah, look, I just think that the first thing is, as you've heard me say before, is we need to create a leadership cadre and a group of leaders in workplaces who have what I would call a sympathetic and a compassionate understanding of mental ill health, and that it is real, and I suppose COVID-19 is helping us all to feel that, because I'm sure that there are many very senior leaders today who have never felt as anxious as they are, as concerned as they are. And so these feelings of depression and anxiety are really real. And so I think it really does start with our leaders and getting our leaders to recognize, that this has a huge impact on people's productivity, their ability to make good decisions, to make good judgments within the workplace. And I think, and then it's about those leaders saying, okay, so, what can we start doing to create an environment where people feel that they can ask for help? So have we got first of all, have we got all the support resources in place? Have we got a good employee assistance program? Are we able to signpost people to the right places to get the help and the support that they need? Are we as leaders prepared to share some of our own stories and tell some of our own stories and how we're feeling, and show that vulnerability to kind of say, you know what, it's okay to feel some of these things. And, we here as an organization to provide you with support, guidance. We're not psychologists and psychiatrists, but we can show that love and the support that you're going to need over this period of time, and that understanding and the compassion. Can we train people more within organizations and just do more training and getting everybody to understand some of what I've been talking about? What are the symptoms? What is depression versus anxiety versus stress? How do you have a conversation with somebody? And how do you get somebody to share how they might be feeling? How do you show some of your own vulnerability? So training, and then, and doing some campaigning within organizations, running some campaigns to say, this is okay. We understand it's real in the world. And, we as an organization are compassionate and sympathetic to this, and we've got resources in place to help you. So, Rome's not built in a day. So it's just some of these small things that organizations can start to truly invest in, versus, kind of having one day, throughout the course of the year talking about depression and then going back to normal. So, and having leaders being prepared to share some of their stories and encourage other people in the organization to share stories, because, the more we share stories, the more it kind of normalizes some of this stuff, and people become more tolerant and accepting of it.
You share some really great points there, Geoff, and I have to say it is a pet peeve. Well, don't get me wrong, it's not a pet peeve of mine completely, and it's always better to do something than to do nothing. But when you talk about, organizations talking about depression for a day and then literally everything else gets forgotten about, it really isn't sufficient. In the modern day world, where depression and anxiety is rising and people are spending more time clearly with things like this, with COVID-19 at home, communication is key, and being relentless and keeping the foot on the gas all the time through training, repetition, story sharing, etc., and not just making it a one-hit wonder is absolutely key. So So thank you so much for sharing. I mean, oh my goodness, there's so many things, and I've written down so many notes actually. And
before we go, Leila, should we I'd like to just end with, I think right now that there are many people sitting at home feeling really anxious, worrying about, whether they might be getting depressed and I just thought I'd just end with just a couple of some very, very simple bits of advice on what people could be doing to try and look after themselves. Mm-hmm. Shall we do that very quickly?
Yes, absolutely. I was going to do a summary, but please do share those key pieces of advice.
So just a couple of things that I'd ask people to continue to do and to think about. The first one is try and avoid speculation right now, and use only reputable sources of information around this outbreak. And if you're in the UK, then it's Public Health England, or if you're in Wales, Public Health Wales, but try and avoid speculation and just rely on reputable sources of information. Try and stay connected with friends, with family, with colleagues. Maybe set up a few private chat groups. Try and increase your communication with colleagues that are working from home, and use some of the technology like Zoom and a couple of other things that are out there. I think also try and manage how you follow the outbreak in the media. I think it's important that we limit our consumption of news and social media. Take a break from the news and the media if it's causing stress. You can't avoid all news because it's important to keep informed, but just limit the amount of media and news that you are reading. Try and anticipate some of your stresses, acknowledge some of how you're feeling, and talk to someone, particularly those that you trust if you're feeling anxious or depressed. Try and stick to a daily routine, so maybe, get up, go for a walk early in the morning, because the rest of the day will start to consume you. Eat a balanced diet, have a bit of a to-do list, take a lunch break, have a regular start and an end to your working day. Maybe build in a bit of meditation or mindfulness practices, or maybe just do some breathing exercises. And for those that are in self-isolation, try and acknowledge that it's a really different rhythm of life. Try and keep in touch with people regularly. See if you can learn something new, maybe a new skill, or do a bit of painting, and just be gentle on yourself over this very, very difficult time, and take a bit of time out to just be gentle, be compassionate to yourself, and rest.
Geoff, there was some absolutely fantastic points there. So much so, I'm considering actually not doing a summary, as I usually do at the end of the podcast. I think you've just raised some absolutely brilliant points there. They all make absolute sense. And I really hope that everyone who's at home listening, tuning in, whether it be on YouTube, whether it be on one of your favorite podcast apps, that you do take heed of some of these things. Like Geoff says, absolutely be kind to yourself. Remember, every cloud has got a silver lining, and every story has got a flip side as well. Look at Geoff as a perfect example. Again, and I'm putting you on a bit of a pedestal here, Geoff, but wonderful example of someone who has a huge amount of responsibility and has come crashing down, but has come straight back out again, of that curve, and has really made a wonderful recovery. And however bad you're feeling, remember, it's not forever. Tough times don't last, but tough people do. If you want to reach out, if you want to have a conversation with either Geoff or myself, and what we're also going to be doing actually over the next couple of weeks is we're going to be doing a number of very specific kind of webinars, not only around mental health, but also around how you can look after yourself, your employees' well-being. You can have a conversation in a safe and open environment with both of us to talk about new tools, new tips, how you're finding things and how you're feeling. And so do feel free to reach out. Do please make sure you check out the webinar in the next couple of weeks, and do stay safe. Most importantly, I guess, Geoff, and I am just going to repeat one piece that you said there, because I just thought it was a really, really lovely expression, and I have actually never heard of it before. But if you are not feeling great, then do the opposite. I think that's really so simple, but so easy to remember. Do the opposite. If you don't feel like it, do the opposite. Just tell yourself, do the opposite. We all have these little voices in our mind, these little demons on our shoulder. And so and make sure that one little voice at least tells you to do the opposite. So on that note, Geoff, thank you so much. Geoff, as you all know, is all over social media. Just a brilliant guy. He's done some brilliant stuff on YouTube, so do make sure you check it out. Obviously, he's on our advisory board as well, and you can see plenty of the content and all the show notes and all the links to health, Great Britain, Wales, etc. will be at the end of today's show. So thank you very much again, Geoff.
Thanks, Leila, and have a good weekend.
Yes, see you all soon. You can visit us at www.dialglobal.org/podcast or www.leilamckenzie.com/podcast. You can also check us out on YouTube. Take care, stay safe, lots of love.
Bye now.
Bye.
Thank you so much for watching the Diverse and Inclusive Leaders podcast. Please do feel free to hit the like button below, or if you'd like to receive future notifications, do ping the notification bell here at the side. If you're interested in the audio version only, you can find it on the following streaming platforms. Any extra info and descriptions will be in the links below. Look forward to seeing you soon.